Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Total Saints podcast. We're the weekly podcast that goes to the heart of all things Southampton Football Club. We're once again live streaming this on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter and Twitch. If you're watching along tonight, then please do leave your questions and comments as we go. As many of you will know, it is of course Halloween this weekend. To mark that in style, a Ghost of TSP Past has been rolled out to host tonight. Yes, my name is Ben Stanfield, and alongside me are a scary set of bloodthirsty opinionators. It's Steve Grant, the owner of SaintsWeb, Glen, the man behind the weekly League One -10 blog, and Jacob Tanswell, the dedicated Southampton FC reporter for The Athletic. Before we get going, a massive thank you as always to our incredibly loyal global TSP patrons. We genuinely couldn't produce this podcast without your continued support. We're also delighted to have NordVPN sponsoring this week's episode. Did you know that NordVPN is the fastest VPN on the market? Well, it's true. If you didn't know what a VPN is, it can do so much for you. From keeping your data secure on public Wi-Fi, giving you access to the internet, and even allowing you to access your favorite streaming websites from anywhere in the world, giving you much more content to enjoy. You can grab your exclusive NordVPN deal by going to nordvpn.com/totalsaints, where you'll get a huge discount off your NordVPN plan, plus 4 months for free. I know Steve is a big fan and a subscriber, so why not sign up today as well? Even better, it's all completely risk-free, as Nord have a 30-day money-back guarantee. Crikey, sign up this weekend, and wherever you are, you could easily find and watch that favourite Halloween horror film that you've been thinking about. Further details, including that link just sent, can be found in the show's notes for the podcast, as well as the YouTube description. Right, coming up on this week's TSP, a week that has, of course, seen a Saints fan installed as the UK's new Prime Minister, and that's exactly where we'll leave all the political chat. Saints prove predictable prey for the Eagles. High-flying Newcastle United prepare to visit St Mary's, and thankfully, one facet of the club does continue to march on. Yes, we'll have the latest on Saints women's team. Underpinned by our TSP patrons, this is episode 212 of the Total Saints podcast. It was yet another frustrating away day for Saints this weekend, losing 1-0 to Crystal Palace. Glen, just like the Villa and Wolves games, a solitary goal late in the first half alongside some toothless attacking from us, enough to secure all 3 points for the home side. I think the word that I kept seeing was predictable.
Yeah, we lose or we learn. Yeah, right. The Villa game, the Wolves game, the Palace game, they've kind of been incredibly similar from the point of view of we've played against teams that have come into it with not a lot of confidence, and we've just sat back passively and let them play their way into the game. Every time we were 1-0 down at half time, and in the second half of all three games we were slightly better, but couldn't get back into it. And it was just poor. I wasn't remotely surprised by the starting lineup, because Ralph's got a habit of doing that. He we played reasonably well against Arsenal, so he picks basically the side that did well in the second half for the next game, which is, okay, on one hand you're rewarding the players who did well, but on the other hand it's a completely different assignment. It reminded me very much of like when we beat Arsenal last year and he picked the same team, same tactics to play Burnley away the following week, and we were garbage. Yeah, not impressed. And I think the first 5 minutes were okay, but then sort of minutes 6 to 45 were as bad as it's been this season, and that's a pretty low bar anyway. 1-0 down. Second half, did the obvious thing, brought on Maitland-Niles, who made quite a big difference, I thought, when he came on. We seemed to play 10 yards further up the pitch, and what do you know, we caused them problems. But we missed the chances again, and I would have been, I wouldn't say I never expected us to score, but I would have been surprised if we had. There was never, it's coming, it's going to be in the next couple of minutes. So it was just kind of limp, and it was so disappointingly similar to those other two games. And I don't know whether to put it down to, the tactics, whether Ralph's been damaged by previous failures where we've tried to play for the whole 90 minutes at 100 miles an hour, but you can't win games in the Premier League only playing for 45 minutes. And it's happening too often, I'm afraid. And I know we got 5 points in a week a couple of weeks ago, but this seems like a major step backwards.
Yeah. Steve, as Glenn said there, it did get better in the second half, or less worse, I suppose. But that first 45 minutes was almost a crescendo of chaos, wasn't it?
It was up until a point, I think, because at the end of the day, while it felt as if Palace were streaming all over us, actually the back line as a sort of last line of defence actually did really well, I thought. The number of actual chances that they created, despite seemingly sort of carving us open all the time. I think Bazunu's had one save to make, and they flashed a couple of crosses across the face of goal where nobody's been throwing themselves at it. And I mean the goal was frustrating. That Lianco thinks he's going to get a foul, doesn't get the foul, and all of a sudden we're kind of, I think we've got probably 2 or 3 players who are, because we're on the ball, we're caught the wrong side of things and never really adjust properly. But it's I didn't think that Palace were as good as people were making out. There was a lot of they're absolutely all over us. They're this Palace team is really good and we've been absolutely dreadful. I mean we struggled to get out because they were using up all of their energy in the first half by pressing us high and forcing us into giving the ball away. And what we basically lacked in that first half was just a cool head and a little bit of patience. When actually you could play a little triangle around that high press, and we've done it before. We've done it in games earlier this season and certainly in previous years with different personnel. And I mean, you'd argue some of those players are less comfortable with the ball at their feet. Players like Bednarek and Stevens, who used to always get flustered when they were put under pressure, and yet I don't remember us giving away many goals when we were playing out from the back. So I think part of it just a lack of patience, maybe a lack of confidence in their own first touch, perhaps. I guess when you're in the sort of league position that we're in, where you're not getting that many wins, there is a tendency to kind of play safety first, and therefore the ball is going to end up eventually, after you've played a few passes around, if the pressure's still coming, the ball's going to go back to the keeper and it's going to go long. But all that's doing is it's inviting them to come onto you again. So it's frustrating. But I mean, as we said, I mean, second half was a lot better. We created a lot of chances in that second half, especially in the last 20, 25 minutes or so, and that was largely as a result of Palace not pressing us anymore after half time, because they'd obviously run their race in the first half, and unfortunately at the end of the day, if we'd been able to spend £30 million on a centre forward with a slightly better conversion rate than our current £15 million centre forward, then we'd have at least drawn that game, if not won it, because we were all over him second half, really.
Yeah. Jacob, you were there. I was following your live tweets. It almost felt inevitable that the goal was coming from the way you were tweeting and talking about Palace sort of getting in between the lines and things like that. I suppose the question, lots of Saints fans, and I can already see lots of comments coming in, which is great. You know, the likes of Ellie talking about the midfield being atrocious and things like that. Were you surprised that Ralph didn't change things sooner? And, you know, I suppose there's always been this air around him, and it's not just Ralph, obviously, that he sometimes is a bit arrogant to maybe admit things are going wrong and, you know, could have whipped off Diallo and brought someone on, for example. So were you surprised he didn't change it sooner? Because it felt to all of us, certainly you that were there, that the goal was coming.
I was. I don't think you even had to make a sub. You could just reshuffle it a little bit, just tweak the system. I remember a couple of years back against Bournemouth at home, he changed the system 3 times because it wasn't working. So he has had a history of being proactive. The thing about Ralph, and I think a lot of people say this, close to the club, is that when one formation works and he stumbles across something that works, he tends to go with it next game and the next game after that, regardless of the team they play and the formation. You know, so for example, the back three, you know, with Lianco and Elianusi down the right side worked at Arsenal. He thought he'd go again. Against Leicester, Shea Adams came on. He thought from now on, we're going to kick it long. We're going to get round him. So he stumbles across these schemes, these different systems, and you know for the next 2-3 games he uses it until a bad defeat comes. So this is a bad defeat, and Steve was right completely. I thought Palace were flaky. I think you look at that midfield, and it's very attack minded. Apart from Milivojevic, they haven't got really any
Who can't
holding.
run.
No, exactly, and you've got any holding midfielder. And when Southampton did, manage to string a few passes together, they could get break beyond with ease, really. With Rebo and Stuart Armstrong getting in between the lines. So I just thought Southampton were just completely void of anything in that first half, and even though it was 0-0 for half an hour, it just felt like they were 2-3-0 down just by the atmosphere, and I think even the fans felt that as well, watching it. So it wasn't good, and they kind of shot themselves in the foot. And I know we're going to point to Shea Adams for missing them, and of course, he has to shoulder some of the burden. But ultimately, if you don't have that first half performance, you're in at 0-0, or even Shea Adams scores in that first half, he hits the post. So I think it's those fine margins up front, but you've got to be better in a system. And I think Ralph, and the coaching staff have got to be more proactive, because everyone saw that goal coming and it turned out to be the winner.
Yeah, and Glenn, talking about the goal, I mean, everyone was kind of talking about the Zaha-Lyanco tussle. I know Jacob was talking about it just before we came on air and things like that. And the goal frustratingly came obviously from Zaha winning the ball back from Lyanco. I think most of us would agree, nothing wrong with the challenge whatsoever. And then obviously sets it up for Edouard's finish. I mean, what did you make of that tussle? And I suppose particularly from a Saints point of view, the goal.
Well, I think we built it up as something that was there to be looked forward to, Lyanco against Zaha, because of what's happened in the past with Zaha getting sent off and wound up. But and I myself was guilty of that as well. But when you look at it in the cold light of day, Zaha's a much better player than Lyanco is. He's got, he's got loads of ability. So if you take away the wind up factor and would one of them get sent off? Zaha is a handful, and he will make a mug out of better defenders than Lyanco is throughout the season. And if you strip away the fact that we don't like Zaha much, it's brilliant from him to chase back, win that ball, and then not only that, he's just extremely positive with it. He drives forward. Mitchell's on the overlap, plays it to him, knocks it over. As Steve said, because the modern fullback is supposed to get forward ahead of the ball. The problem always comes if you give it away behind him, and that's what happens. So that's why Elyounoussi was out of position, and then you're all scrambling to get across and try and prevent the prevent the cross coming in. And to be fair, Salisu was very close to get into the cross before Edouard as well. But it's just a shame that Edouard managed to get that one. But I have to say, it wasn't just Zaha. I was impressed with Elise and Eze, and their movement across the pitch. Did you see the one where Edouard's goal was disallowed? I don't know, he was narrowly offside, but the run that I think it was Elise made, he made a run from the right wing to centre back. Right wing to sort of central areas in front of the penalty area, and you could see Perrault sort of trying to pass him on to someone, but Saints make a decision with that, with that movement, and it just makes it so much more difficult. It's what I was going on about last week about, Saints tend to attack in straight lines. There was a little bit more from us in that regard in the second half with Rebo and Armstrong getting on the ball, but I thought that the attacking midfield three for Palace were really, really good, and because of the way we played the first half, we didn't get to go at the weak parts of their team, which are Milivojevic and Slupp in midfield, which are the fullbacks. But we didn't do anything to test them. I mean, Joel Ward, how on earth is he still getting Premier League games? But we did nothing against him, really.
I mean, he's due a testimonial, I think, next year. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, 40 years at one club. But yeah, so it was disappointing goal, and I think it's a shame for Lyanco, because you really want him to do well, but he got caught out there, and that is ultimately the reason we lost the game.
And part of the issue with the whole Lyanco-Zaha matchup is that, we try and wind Zaha up because we know that he gets distracted. And yet, why have we chosen the one guy in our team who is also going to get very distracted by this situation? You need somebody who likes playing. I mean, while likes playing the wind-up merchant, is also able to maintain a cool head themselves. That's why Prowse's been so good at it in previous years when he's been tasked with fulfilling that role, because you know that Prowse will be able to put that out of his mind when he's got to actually focus on the game.
Yeah.
Whereas the Anko, being the sort of all-action, sort of emotional character that he is, I mean, it's almost a caricature, isn't it, of a sort
like
of
Tom and Jerry or something, isn't it? Like dangling the carrot almost. Yeah.
But it was obvious that basically if he didn't manage to get Zaha to react, then Zaha was going to get him to react. And it was just a case of who was going to blink first. I mean, as it turned out, they ended up both getting booked in the same instant, which, I mean, I kind of thought Zaha was a little bit lucky there, because he did look as if he stamped on Lianco's ankle, or at least looked as if he was trying to, which I'm pretty sure is a red card offence. But, I mean, you know what? Not the idiots in Stockley Park are like. But it was, you're tasking somebody to do a job where you're kind of you're almost expecting them to fail. It's weird.
Yeah. And Glen, I mean, that's just one away goal now for Saints in 5 games. I think it's 3 and 7 in the Premier League in total. You know, Mark said here, Ralph is getting a hammer in again, but if we'd have backed him in the summer with a striker who could score, we may well have won yesterday. Tom saying, how many chances do we need to put the ball in the back of the net? I mean, it's not just Shea. I think, you know, all of us sitting here, myself, certainly,
No, it's not.
you know, we like Shea, we like his work rate. He's clearly developed in his time at Saints, but at Premier League level, picking on him particularly for those two, I mean, one or both of those have got to go in yesterday, haven't they?
The right-footed one has got to go in. There, we've got Shea hits the goalkeeper from everywhere, doesn't he? I mean, do you remember a couple of years ago at Tottenham where he managed to hit Lloris from like 3 yards or something when he had the whole goal to aim at? Shea seems to hit the goalkeeper. Adam Armstrong always hits the defender with the shot every single time. So we seem to have this issue. The first one that came to his right foot, I thought Shea should have scored. The second one, where Elyounoussi blocked Mitchell's clearance, and him and Shea and Aribo worked that really nicely. It was a left-footed effort, and it was a decent save, to be fair, because it was nearly past him when he dropped on it. So I don't blame him too much for that one. But you know, I'll defend Shea Adams a little bit, because he's the best that we've got. He is the best that we've got, and yes, it was a failing in the summer, but there were a lot of issues that needed addressing in the squad. And I don't know I can't remember how many players we brought in, about 10, whatever it was. But you know, it is very difficult to fix every single problem in one transfer window. You know, you could argue that was the most pressing problem. And it probably was. So it will. But
it's also always going to be the most expensive problem.
Of course it is. Yeah, of course it is.
Because,
and Ralph,
I mean,
Ralph mentioned that, didn't he?
You look all the way down the Premier League. There's very few clubs who have got that centre forward that would make the difference for us.
And there's no guarantee, is there, that money will return goals?
No.
No,
but what if I may interject? The thing that I find so bizarre is that Southampton were willing to let Shea Adams go in the summer, and despite all reports, they told his people, they told Shea that he can go. If you find a club with that, come out with the right fee, he can go. And now, as everyone knows, we're relying on Shea Adams to score goals for Southampton. He is the goal scorer. He's the one that seems to have all the chances, clear-cut chances anyway. So I just find the complete turnaround from a guy that was on his way out to now being the guy who's supposed to be this goal scoring saviour a little bit odd and jarring. And I kind of empathise with Shea.
Yeah, I see SaintsFC Will has said, I've seen a lot of criticism towards Ralph again after yesterday. Whilst I'm neither Ralph in or Ralph out, I can't help but feel sorry for him when he made it clear in the summer how he wanted a centre forward. So absolutely sort of reiterating that. Just to finish off on the Crystal Palace, and do you know what, when I wrote my notes for this, Jacob, it felt like quite a negative question. But after the game yesterday, I saw you tweeted saying something along the lines of didn't seem to have any practice patterns of play going forward. Most things were off the cuff. You know, as a manager that's been here nearly 4 years and a match day squad yesterday, that most of those players in that squad yesterday have been here 12 to 18 months. Does it not feel a little bit concerning that, you know, this is the Premier League, it's not the Sunday League, that they haven't sort of got those practice patterns of play?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's one of the reasons why I can kind of see why fans are so strongly against Ralph, in some of them anyway. It's not just the league position, because 16 is probably where Southampton have been. It's that I think they're regressing with the ball. I remember going to every game in lockdown, and they were really quite good. I know they had Yannick Vestergaard who was having this purple patch, but there was patterns of play. You know, players getting into the red zone. Ralph would constantly shout red zone. You know, the two strikers up front would make certain movements that you'd see every single game. I felt like they were really improving with the ball, especially when Kyle Walker-Peters came in. And now you see this team, and you know they try and keep it tight at the back, and then when they're 1-0 down, they just tend to go all in, and they keep Shea Adams up top, and then they have about 4 attacking midfielders. You know, even Ward-Prowse yesterday was playing as a number 10 for the last 20 minutes, and they just tend to float. And I don't really see any movements, or you know, even towards the end, I think Joe Aribo had the ball, didn't he? And he barked for Lianco to overlap him. I thought that's probably not part of the plan. So it just seems a little bit desperate at the moment, and they're going all in too early because they haven't got that clinical forward. So I am quite concerned with what Southampton do with the ball. I know there's been a lot of we focus a lot on what they do out of possession, and they're not pressing anymore, but they don't seem to have any clear-cut ideas or concerted efforts of how to get the ball from A to B, unless you're just hitting it long to Shea Adams and hoping to get a knockdown. So I think that's probably the most concerning thing for me anyway.
And just briefly, Jacob, on that point then, is that something, again, back to the training ground this week, or is it something that's going to take longer? It's almost like, as you say, it's regressed so much that it's not going to be fixed in a few days.
Yeah, I just find it a little bit odd. I remember going to a few games last year, and I saw Salisu take the throw in, and that was the first time I thought, okay, he's going back to this pragmatic, percentage football type of football. And I think it's probably because he hasn't got that quality anymore in terms of Danny Ings, that clear-cut striker, and they're trying to lean on, percentage football, and I don't think Ralph can get that back unless he gets genuine quality in those attacking areas, or Romeo Lavia completely transforms his team again.
I can see Senka Tully one saying striker's not quite Premier League class, but neither is the midfield. So it does feel like there's a few problems around at the moment. Look, just to wrap up the Crystal Palace game, then that feels like enough of the negative side of the fence. Come on then, Jacob. We all want to hear about the fact that you tweeted last night that you were pretty much the last person in Selhurst and got locked in and had to shout at security guards. So for everyone that wasn't there, or all of us, set the scene. Tell us what happened, because it sounded brilliant.
Yeah, so I think after the game, Ralph had his presser. There was about 30 journalists there. I was trying to write something furiously, just trying to work out, what had happened. Time had gone on, and normally it's a steward in the media room, and they normally say, "Come on, your time's up, you've got to go." And they'd left by then. At this point, it's just me in the room with all this food, and which is, I took a few things, drinks, cup of teas, and then I got outside, and there was no one around, and every good door was shut, every turnstile was shut. And then I managed to see a security guard in the distance. Well, I saw a shadow, it was pitch black, and I just started to shout, God knows what. And he came over, and I think he was a little bit angry that they locked up without realising that someone was still in the stadium. So, I had Selhurst Park all to myself late last night.
Yeah, we could have been coming to you live at Selhurst Park tonight, really, couldn't we? So, but there we go. No, good stuff. Well, we're all glad that you made it out safely, and hopefully everyone that's listening is impressed by Jacob's new microphone. I saw a note from Alfie saying nice headset, Jacob. So it's good to know that Alfie's watching as well. But good stuff. Look, before we move on to preview the Newcastle game, then we've always liked to focus some attention on the Saints women's team. Played Sunderland today at St Mary's in front of about 2,800. Jacob, I know you were there. The score was 1-0 thanks to Ella Pusey's second goal of the season. They're now up to second in the championship table, which is brilliant. Steve, I saw Kayla Rendell had been picked in the, I think it was the FASWL Full-Time Magazine Team of the Weekend last week, and Ella Pusey had also been nominated for Player of the Week. So alongside today's result, I think that's 4 wins in 7 games now. Great to see the team doing so well individually and together.
Yeah, I mean, judging by, from what I've seen, they've been grinding stuff out a little bit. A lot of 1-0s, but they've looking down the games they've played. They've basically played the top 7 or 8 now. Sunderland today was the first game they've played against anybody sort of below that. So I think for them to have been sort of up in contention already, shows sort of how quickly they've adapted. Obviously, they had that one game, that opening game at home to Charlton, where they kind of got taught a little bit of a lesson, really. but since then they've kind of worked it out and found a way to win these games, not conceding many goals at all, which is always a good start. Because if you're not conceding, then at the end of the day you can win games with just the single goal. And that's obviously what they've been relying on. I mean, certainly from watching that game today on the FA player stream, they got into a lot of positions where just a little bit more sort of clinical, either with the pass or with the finish. They probably should have put Sunderland away by 3 or 4, but that's something that they'll learn, and they'll probably learn the hard way. They'll probably come up against somebody, not take the chances that they've had, and go down the other end, and they'll score their one chance that they create, and that'll be the lesson. Then they'll hopefully move on and learn from that. But no, I mean it's been an entirely positive start to the season for them, and yeah, as you mentioned, good attendance in at St Mary's today, even though it was a 12 o'clock kickoff on a Sunday, which it's not great for people, is it? Really, let's be honest. Those 2 o'clock games are a lot more friendly for people who are coming along. But it's, I mean, as ever with professional football, it's down to the broadcasters, and the FA player have decided that they wanted that to be the early one, so there we are. But no, I mean we move on. I think we got Coventry United on Wednesday.
Right, Wednesday,
Tuesday or Wednesday?
Yeah, Wednesday night is St Mary's.
Which seems an anomaly on the fixtures, because I don't think anybody else is playing this week midweek. So I'm not quite sure how that's whether we're sort of putting a fixture in to make up for one that we're not playing, like maybe the following week or something like that. I've not looked that far ahead, but it does seem a bit odd that we're straight back into league action immediately. But that'll be, I mean, against the side that have got no points so far, that'll be one that they'll definitely be looking to win, especially having lost to them in the group stage of the Conti Cup.
Yeah, no, good stuff. Well, Chris, who I know goes to a lot of the games, says great game and we march on. We're in third on goal difference. So apologies, Chris. I know Martin wouldn't have made that statistical error there. So, and he said I think it was due to a fixture clash on Sunday, and there's 300 increase today compared to the Charlton game. So it shows that things are heading in the right way. And further good news this week as well, as Starling Bank became the official 2022-23 principal partner for the women's team. Starling, with that game against Sunderland today, will now feature on the first team logo. Rachel Corone, brand and marketing director at Starling Bank, had said sponsoring Southampton FC women reinforces Starling's commitment to supporting up-and-coming female football players as we try to level the playing field through equal training opportunities and dedicated resources. Jacob, alongside them, obviously employing, I think it's about 400 people across Southampton, so there's already a connection with the city. Really good in terms of now a partnership for the women's team, as Steve mentioned earlier.
Yeah, and I think it's always good to have that type of sponsor that it can see what you're trying to build, and I think it's perfect for what Southampton and Marion Spacey Co especially are trying to do in terms of investing in the ground upwards. Really, they're developing grassroots teams, coaches. I think that's part of the agreement. So this is an agreement that extends beyond just a shirt sponsor. More investment, more structure. I think what Southampton have done, and Marion Spacey Co in particular has done over the last 18 months especially, has been remarkable, not only in focusing on the progression on the pitch, but building everything, the academies, the age groups below it. It's one of the things that Southampton as a supporter group should be really proud of, because they're managing to attract these type of sponsors. Attendances are only going to go up. I think there was 120% increase in season ticket sales this season. Incredible, and it only looks like it's going to grow. So really progressive work, and I think the sponsor only shows it as well.
Yeah, no, good stuff. So great. Well, as Steve mentioned there, and Chris is really helpful here, he's saying it's because Saints are playing Newcastle at home next Sunday, Steve. That's why the game's been played midweek. So there you go. It's live info coming to you. But yeah, they're down at St Mary's on Wednesday night. It's again £8 for adults, and I think £2 for under 18. So why not get down there and give them some additional support with the team doing so well. Just briefly then, Glenn, alongside that, the B team were playing today as well. I say the B team, it was pretty much the first team, because I think Alex McCarthy, Walcott, Gineppo, Maitland-Niles, Edozie, Juan Larios, and then obviously Romeo Lavia as well. I know Diallo came on at half-time, but they eventually beat Middlesbrough 8-1. I suppose it was less about the scoreline. I know Sekamara got 4, Theo got 3, I think, but probably less about the score and more about some of those players getting valuable fitness and game time.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's always annoyed me in the past that we've sometimes not used reserve team games, B team games, to give players who are not quite in the first team, minutes that they could do with, and I think Sekumara proves the point massively. Strikers thrive off the confidence of scoring goals, and regardless of the opposition, he'll be going into next week's training for the Newcastle game a lot more confident than he was before he played today. I mean, I don't know what sort of side Middlesbrough had out, but it's any goal's a good goal for a striker, and it's obviously about giving Romeo Lavia minutes as well. You say he played 45, did he?
45, that's right. Yep.
45. So that's that'll be more useful to him than doing another training session. So he'll have been pushing himself in that first half to see how far he could go. So it's great. I felt a bit sorry for Middlesbrough when I saw the team we put out and the goals started flying in straight away. You just think, oh man, that's not great. But it is what it is. We are a top level sporting club after all. So there you go. So no, I was. But I was very surprised to see the strength of the side we put out. But I guess that as we've got so many young players, that we can do that without breaking any eligibility rules. So fair play. It was nice.
I think there was a little bit of a pointer, wasn't there, with the under-18 side that played, because I think a lot of the guys who have featured regularly for the B team in recent weeks were all back in the under-18 side that played yesterday morning.
Yeah.
So I think I think that always kind of gave a little pointer, because I don't think they'd ever play any of those kids two days running these days.
Yeah.
And if you were going to be heading back up north with a Theo Walcott masterclass under their belt, Glen.
Yeah, I mean, if you were being very cynical about it, you could say it takes some of the attention away from the absolute shambles that happen at the Palace.
It's good. It's good for podcasts that are trying to find positives at the moment. So absolutely.
Yeah.
So and we should just to end that as well. We should say a very big well done to Tyler Dibbling and Jimmy J Morgan, who both scored 2 goals for England under-17s. I think they beat Georgia 6-2 on Friday night, and that's helped them qualify now for the UEFA Under-17 Euro Elite Round of qualifying for next year's Championship finals, I think. So well done to 2 of them. So there are, I promise you, Saints fans, positives out there. Okay, to finish up this week, a look ahead to next weekend's Premier League visit of Newcastle United. There's multiple different directions that we could take this conversation, but I'll tell you what, lads, let's keep it to the football. Steve, I mean, they've obviously had a great start to the season, thrashing Villa 4-0 yesterday. Let's be honest, it's going to be a tough game.
Yeah, I mean, they murdered Villa, didn't they?
Stop it.
Yeah, it was. I mean, that was. Yeah, let's be brutally honest. Villa are a bad team at the moment, and Newcastle are not. They've got the best defence in the league, I think. Nick Pope has got 6 clean sheets already, so he's justifying the money that they paid out for him. I mean, at the end of the day, Newcastle, while they've spent a lot of money, they've actually spent it really well and really sensibly. There's not been any. I mean, Chris Wood is the only one really that's been massively overpaid. But that was, I mean, they reaped the benefits of that just by taking the centre forward off a direct rival last season. So, I mean, they'll be quite happy with the business they've done, and yeah, Eddie Howe's trying to get them into a functioning team. And I mean, he's even managed to get a tune out of Miguel Almiron, which I mean, I do wonder how much influence Jack Grealish's fairly stupid words in sort of on social media have kind of led to Almiron sort of deciding, right, okay, now I'm actually going to try and be a proper footballer. But yeah, they're a good side. They've got a very, very well drilled defence. I mean, let's be honest, it's an Eddie Howe team, so they are going to be time wasting to hell. Yeah. They're going to know all of the dark arts, and I'm sure that come Sunday we are going to be utterly infuriated by it. But we've got to find a way through. I mean, we've got to be better. We were fine first half against West Ham. Little bit unfortunate that Fabianski had a good game in that one. Arsenal again could have got more out of that game if if things had fallen for us. And as I said yesterday, second half we could have had 3 or 4 second half fairly comfortably. So it's not as if we're not creating chances. We've just got to find a way of actually putting them in the back of the net rather than straight at the keeper. So yeah, I mean that's presumably going to be the bulk of the work this week. Find a way to stop Almiron weaving his magic. Be interesting to see if Callum Wilson's fit, because that always seems to be a bit of a coin toss. But given that we've got a World Cup coming up, and he's made it very clear that he fully expects to be in that team, despite having not been picked for a squad for 2 years now, which I think is quite a bold claim. Be interesting to see whether they're at full strength for that. But yeah, I mean, let's be honest, they're in the top 4 for a very good reason at the moment. So it's not going to be an easy game, but we have seemed to kind of turn up at home against the better sides this year. So maybe them being sort of more on the front foot than they perhaps used to be in the past, maybe that might play into our hands a little bit. But we'll see.
Indeed. Well, he's scoring goals. That's one of the few things that he's doing as an Englishman at the moment. Glenn, look, just to sort of mention Eddie Howe. I mean, obviously there was pressure on him when he went up there last winter time almost. I think it's pretty much a year now to the day since he went in there. He's obviously got a new contract since then, but he kept them up. And to be fair, you're looking at that team now. A lot of the players that are in the team were there prior to sort of the takeover. I know there's a few in there, but give him credit. He's done a good job.
You have to look at players who were there before and how much better they're playing now, like Joe Linton, Almiron, Longstaff. These are players that have been there for a long time, and it goes to show that you improve when you've got better players alongside you. The quality they brought in with Bruno Jimenez, whatever his name is, in midfield, that's brought the best out of the likes of Willock and Longstaff, and Eddie Howe's been very astute with the defensive signings he's made. Trippier's an excellent signing. Wouldn't have been everyone's cup of tea because I think he was about 30, 31 or whatever he was, but he wanted him there as a sort of leader of the defence, and he's done that. The centre halves, Shah and Botman, they're a good pairing. And the previous captain, Lascelles, he don't get a game now. Yeah. So I think, is Matty Targett injured?
He's just not been playing, I don't think, has
he? Yeah, I know they've got the lamppost playing left back, haven't they, at the moment? Dan Burn. So it's a good team that he's built there. And our mate St Maximin can't get a game either. So that shows how well
Dan
they're playing. So I would love to be able to criticise Eddie Howe because I never liked him. When he was at Bournemouth, it was just moaning. Him and John Williams were brilliant on the radio, weren't they? It was just like, my God, what is going on there? But he's done a very good job at Newcastle so far, and yes, he has the money to bring in the players that he wants to bring in, but that don't always work for everyone, does it? I mean, look at Everton over the years. So no, can't knock it, and it'll be another really, really difficult game. But as Steve says, we do tend to turn up against the better sides. Excuse me. And I fancy us to do it again on Saturday.
Fingers crossed. Jacob, look, from a Saints point of view, then the chaps have mentioned some of the key threats. I've just drafted Callum Wilson into my fantasy team, so there's every chance that he'll either be unfit or won't score, so that's a positive. But from a Saints point of view, I mean, how do they sort of manage that balance between trying to cope with clear Newcastle attacking threat and trying to keep on the front foot themselves, because they're going to need to?
Yeah, we spoke about the lack of patterns of play, and one of the reasons is the lack of any sort of constant formation or just familiarity, really. So, I expect Bella-Kotchap to be back and starting next week. So I think that gives you the license then to perhaps go into a back four. For some reason, Maitland-Niles has not played right back. I think perhaps he could play there, but then that will depend on whether Romeo Lavia is fit enough to start. So there are more options than there have been in recent weeks, which I think is a good thing. Southampton at home, it's their last game before the World Cup at home.
Yeah.
Ralph Hasenhüttl's got to get something out of this game for his sake. So we just got to go. I keep saying it. He's just got to go to how he played, how everyone loved him. The reason why people loved him, the reason why he got so much success with such a pretty poor squad in quality. He's got to go back to his principles, because if he's gonna leave, then he's gonna have regrets, but not doing that because he's lost his identity. So I think he needs to go on the front foot. Whoever he played at home, he needs to go for it, and hopefully with Armel Bella-Kotchap and Lavia hopefully being fit, then that will give him license to.
Yeah, and Steve, just briefly, I suppose that is the one positive now. He's got a few options starting to come back. If Bella-Kotchap is fit, Lavia, obviously he's only played 45 minutes. It's going to take him time to get up to Premier League level again. You can't just chuck him in necessarily for 90 minutes. But Maitland-Niles is back, available. There's some options there that he can now think this week about trying to put his best team out there.
Yeah, I mean, it might be that Lavia is only good for an hour or 70 minutes or whatever on Sunday, but I think ultimately, if he's fit enough to play, then he plays. And I would imagine that the same will apply to Bella-Kotchap. I think Ralph seems to not quite trust Chaleta Sarr alongside Salisu as a 2. So especially when we don't have a recognised right back at the moment. So yeah, perhaps Maitland-Niles slots in there, which is not ideal really. I mean, he's shown that he's very capable in the centre of the park, and ideally that will be where he'd play. But perhaps he then slots in once Lavia gets removed, sort of 20 minutes or so from the end of the game. Perhaps if that's the way we go. But yeah, having a few options, and I mean also having a couple of players who have scored a few goals. Albeit against Middlesbrough under 12s or whoever it was they were up against this afternoon. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, you can only beat what's in front of you. So they got the goals, and hopefully that'll have done Mara and Walcott's confidence the world of good. I mean, Walcott's actually been fine, hasn't he? The two sub appearances he's made, he's come on, and he's looked composed. He's not looked off the pace actually, really, which is something that. For the bulk of last season, he was miles off, which is why he wasn't playing. But yeah, I mean, we've got options, and yet at the same time, there's quite a few of those players that you just think, well, he's going to play him, and I guess we'll wait and see how it all how it goes in the mixing pot and comes out the other side. But I think, yeah, I don't really know what system he'll go for. Where I think now if as Jacob says Bella-Kotchap's fit, I'd be surprised if we don't go back to a back 4. Even though we're playing against one of the better sides. Just because I think we would rather have the ball than not. And being able to put an extra guy in midfield enables us to exert a little bit more control over things. Yeah. And certainly not get overrun through the middle like we were at times in the first half yesterday, that's for sure.
Yeah. Ellie, who's watching on YouTube, says, speaking of James Ward-Prowse, when Lavia's back, I'd be tempted to put Ainsley Maitland-Niles and Lavia on together. JWP really struggling, played every game this season, possibly could do with the rest. So it'll be interesting to see, obviously, in terms of the midfield, whether that happens. But Glenn, Jacob's been stealing my notes there because I'd had in there that it is the last home game before the World Cup in the Premier League. Of course, they got Sheffield Wednesday at home in the Cup next week. But important to try and end on a high in the Premier League, and despite the Crystal Palace game, try and build on that momentum from the second half against Arsenal.
Yeah, it definitely is important, and I totally agree with what Jacob says. We need to get something from this game, and we need to go for it. We just don't want another horrible passive performance. If we go for it and we get in their faces and they beat us fair and square, then I don't think many people would have too much of an issue with that. But it's these games where we don't do much and we still lose anyway. You kind of think, well, you might as well have, you almost want in one of those games where we swarm all over teams for 70 minutes and then we're just hanging on. I mean, you've got 5 subs now, so why not? I just want to see us being positive. I don't want to see us sitting back And we're not playing prime Barcelona here. They're good, but they're not that great. We shouldn't be that far behind them if we go in with it, go in positive, and we do have, if Bella-Kotchap and Lavia are back, that makes us a better team. So yeah, I'm quite hopeful that we can do something in this game. And just to echo Jacob's point, I think for Ralph's sake and everyone's morale going into the summer, we certainly need to. But anyway, I'm looking forward. In the summer, what am I talking about? The World Cup. I'm looking forward
somewhere, Glenn.
Yeah, it is Qatar. But I'm looking forward to the last game against Liverpool, because they're going to have so many players going to the World Cup. We really have to go into them. Really have to get stuck into them big time. Yeah, see, many of them fancy it. I'm deadly serious about that, because there's not many of our players that are going. So maybe we'll get a nice little win at Liverpool just before we go away, because they're rubbish at the moment, aren't they?
That's one for you and Martin to chat about next week, I think. But no, good stuff. Well, just on to predictions then. Alex, our producer, who admits to knowing very little about football, was the only one to predict the correct score from the Crystal Palace game. He predicted them to win 1-0, so he got 3 points. So in typical TSP Prediction League fashion, he's now joint top of the league with Glen with 12 points. Steve and myself are propping up the table respectively. I can see some predictions coming through already. Ellie saying 4-0, I'm assuming, to Newcastle. Chris Walker, 4-0 Newcastle, not looking forward to it. I can see my dad's watching in Florida, which is great. Don't think Ralph knows what his best team is. Going to be another very difficult afternoon. Martin's gone for 3-1 to Newcastle. I'm going to get it out there early. I've gone for 3-0 Newcastle, sorry. So it's not an optimistic start. But Jacob, what are you fancying?
Do you know what? I think the reason why I'm so bad at this prediction thing is that I think I've gone for Saints to win every game apart from Man City. So I'm going to continue that and go 2-1 Saints.
2-1 Saints, excellent. Very optimistic. Glenn, what about you?
I don't know. I will go for a draw. I will go for a 1-1 draw.
1-1 draw.
Can't speak. Right. Sorry.
Steve, to finish the set.
Yeah, I think a draw as well. I'll go for the thriller, 0-0.
Cool. Okay, that's it for this week's episode. Don't forget that you can follow Total Saints Podcast on Facebook and Twitter. It's just at Total Saints Pod. There's also our website, totalsaints.co.uk, which includes a link to our online shop, Total Saints Icons. We're also on Patreon, where you can support the podcast with a monthly contribution. Just visit Patreon, which is Patreon/Total Saints Podcast. We have 4 tiers ranging from £5 to £20 per month. Each comes with its own perks, including weekly shout-outs for those patrons in our Francis Benali and Mick Shannon tiers. On that basis, a big thank you to Dave Melton, Mark Atkins and Matt Hall in the Francis Benali tier, and also to Colt Baker, Dave Ernsberger, Ed Busy, Nick Hinkston, Phil Cook, Matt Rose, and Nick Reed in our rather substantial, and we're very grateful for that, Mick Shannon tier. We're also ramping up plans for some TSP World Cup podcasts over the coming weeks. So patrons, look out imminently on how and where we're looking to get you involved in that, as well as the return of a TSP VIP patron catch-up in early to mid-December. My thanks to Steve, Glenn and Jacob. Martin and the chaps will be back again next week. Until then, happy Halloween. Thank you to all of you for listening and watching, and catch you all soon.